Greetings of the day, everyone. I'm privileged to welcome you all into the third edition of Orangecity Literature Festival, organized by SGR Knowledge Foundation in association with GH Raisoni University, powered by Raisoni Group of Institutions. I'm Janvi Umre, delighted to be your anchor for today's session. What's up with the climate? A story of cloud called Bhura. Climate Champion to the Rescue by Ms. Bijal Vachharajani in conversation with Payahar. When, when Bijal Vachharajani, ma'am, is not reading Harry Potter, she dreams up pictures, book as editors, scissor hands at Pratham Books. Bijal is the author of multiple children's books, including A Called Cloud Bhura. And so you want to know about the environment. She has edited a magazine, rescued parakeets, tigers, and elephants, and is part of the Abhiyan Library movement. Bijal has a master's in environment security and peace from University of Peace in Costa Rica, and is certified climate warrior. It is an honor to have you with us, Ms. Bijal, ma'am. And this gets even more delightful as we have Ms. Paya Hart, who will be in conversation with her as the moderator. A surgeon by profession, a writer by heart, and a seeker in spirit, Paya is forever in flight on wings of imagination, soaring into virtual realms of words and verses. She thrives on book, on chai, on fictionalizing philosophy and philosophing fiction. She has been writing since she was 8. Her poems and short stories have found their place in various magazines and anthologies. Her first novel, Where There Is a Will, a mystery, won the prize at the manuscript contest held at Pune International Literary Festival 2016. Her next novel, a suspense thriller, Dial T for Terror, received rave reviews too. A genre called Hope was launched during the OCLF 2019 and is truly a genre with a difference. I once again welcome you Bijal Vachharajani ma'am, and I welcome you Paya Hart ma'am. Also, before moving ahead, I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the support of Speaking Tiger publication as their association invaluable to OCLF. Now, my dear audience, you are about to experience between two very dramatic, dynamic individuals. So, without skipping a moment, I humbly invite Paya ma'am to lead us ahead.
Thank you, Janvi, for this introduction, and welcome, Bijal. And it's a pleasure to be speaking to you this morning. And how are you doing?
Thank you so much for inviting me here. And I'm good. We're coming from a sunny day. So
That's great. So we would love to know. How did you reach here? What seed in you germinated and became this beautiful writer?
that's a great question. As a child, I was very, very shy and introverted. We moved cities from Delhi to at that point it was Bombay, and it was a very definitive experience for me. I was in standard fifth, moving to sixth, and everything was just so new. And I didn't know how to articulate my feelings to, anyone. So I started maintaining a diary very much like Betty in Archie comics. And that kind of gave me that space to be able to understand my emotions, to pour my heart out to somebody who doesn't judge, whose only job is to listen. And that's actually how I started enjoying writing. Um, and then somehow work led to different spaces, and I realized that a lot of the work I do stands at the intersection of environment and children. And one of the best ways to actually bring it together for me was through writing, because I kind of feel like words are important, and they're what we have, and if used well can inform, can uh, foster change, but can also for me, words were something that helped me imagine. And I feel like that's really why I started writing.
So great, and I believe that the clouds have all been crying aloud, and it's you that have given them words, you know. So, what is this new book about?
You're talking about Cloud Called
Yeah,
Bhura?
yeah.
So
So
this is this book came out in 20. I'm just going to double check. I'm very bad with years, numbers, which is why I'm a writer. This book came out in 2019, um, and it's published by Talking Club, which is the children's imprint of Speaking Tiger. It's illustrated by my friend. Their name is Oindri, and there are some gorgeous illustrations in it, as you can see. So, Bhura happened because in 2012-13, I was studying climate change in Costa Rica, and I came across this really fascinating piece of study which talked about the Asian brown cloud, or it's the brown cloud phenomenon, which was observed through satellite pictures, and it was basically a cloud full of smog and pollution, which was being seen over southern parts of the world. And I was, it started, it got me thinking, what happens if a real brown cloud comes and hovers on top of Mumbai? And to me, I've always been fascinated by the sociological aspects of climate change, because climate change is a scientific, definite phenomena, but it's also defined by the way people perceive it, the way scientists talk about it, the way media reports about it, the way politicians come up with policies, the way industrialists decide their uh, their KRAs in that sense. And so I ended up writing a story. It's about this Bhura, which is the brown cloud who comes and hovers on top of Mumbai, and the city goes into a tizzy. There's the politicians, there's the journalists, there's the scientists who are trying to make sense of it, and in all of this chaos that the adults navigating their way through are four friends. Their name Amni, Mithil, Tammy, and Andrew. And you see the whole story from Amni's eyes and Tammy's eyes. And they're the four children who say, this is not okay. This is our future. We've got to question. We've got to investigate. So it's in some way it's a mystery that we're trying to crack, but it's also got a lot of it's got a lot of the city in it. It's got a lot of questions about what happens to the wildlife, what happens to the sea, that is such a integral part that is such an integral part of Mumbai. And at the end of the day, do we choose to believe that science is the way forward for all of us, and the fact that we have some amazing laws that we can turn to when we need support of, and my strong belief in children's power.
Uh, that's amazing because it's really so interesting. But to have such a difficult concept in the form of a story, and that too for children. So, how do you manage to do that? Because you've been writing for adults as well. You've written blogs, you've written articles, you've edited magazines. You're still one of the editors in Pratham. So, I mean, how is it different to write for children versus writing for adults for you?
There's a children's book creator. His name is Morris Sendak, and his work is very pivotal in picture books especially. And once somebody asked Morris, why do you write for children? And he said, I write and I draw. I'm paraphrasing at this point, but basically that's pretty much what I do. I think I write, and it ends up being for children because I think children are one of our smartest audience. Children and young people like Janvi here. So I think they will call you out on if you're talking down to them. They'll call you out if they think you're pulling the wool over their eyes. And I feel like often when I walk into a classroom which is full of children and we have conversations about climate change and about nature, about crabs, and about tigers, all of them, the way they react to it, you just don't see that in adults. We're all jaded, we're all cynical. And one of my heroes is this nature author called Rachel Carson, and she said something really amazing. She said that every child is born with an inherent sense of wonder. And what they need is sometimes the companion of an adult to make sure that that sense of wonder is fostered. I kind of feel like the books that we write and we get to children do that work sometimes. And which is why I really end up writing for children, because they're such a fun audience, and they will call you out on anything, so they keep you on your toes all the time. And I also think that we all start reading as children, right? So these are the books that inform your values, your behavior, your attitudes in many ways. And I love knowing that some of the books we are creating, so what the work we are creating means that we are creating a group of future readers for the world.
That's really true. And that reminds me that somewhere in your literature, somewhere on your blog, I read that you believe in early reader literacy. So, getting these concepts, making them simple enough for them to understand, especially when you're working with the smaller age groups. So, how do you manage to do that? How do you manage to simplify such complicated concepts that very often even adults don't understand?
Pure, you're a teacher, so I'm sure you'll also understand this, that it's easier to talk to young people as opposed to adults about complexities sometimes. One of the things that I do believe, that when you're talking to younger children, you think about it like a conversation between a child and an adult. You can have the choice of standing up and looking down at a child and saying something, at which point it's going to look like it's instructional, it's being taught, or you can sit down with the child and you can have a conversation. And that's what I think is the difference, where when you're writing for children, you want to um, talk with them and not at them or to them. And I think that's the difference. Also, because it's amazing, often I have conversations with adults about climate change, which is decreasing because I'm so cynical now. But and they just have these questions. But then, why is the media not writing about it? Why is this one not doing anything about it? And children will actually be like, the moment you've talked to them about the science of it, like often I'll talk to them about the carbon, about the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And then they'll have questions, which are great questions. They want to know what's happening. What is there a solution to it? What can they do? And that's when you realize that, when you deconstruct, like in my case, it's science for children, and you present it in a narrative format, it unlocks the curiosity, which is what. So I, of course, to answer your question a little bit better, I do a lot of research. I have every time before I do a book, my wall is papered with research. I have notebooks. I have little bookmarks on my computer with stories I want to go back to. And then I put it all aside and I just write. And I kind of feel like that is the way it works for me.
And you just spoke about narrative. So you get it all into a story format, which of course needs a lot of creativity to get science and put it forth as a story. So what do you have to say to that? How is your experience being with converting scientific concepts into stories? Because originally you seem to me to be a storyteller. So how do you marry the two, science and storytelling?
Uh, so I'm a journalist by training. So my first book was actually a non-fiction book, which was so much easier in the sense that I knew how to report. So there are reported stories about farmers, there are reported stories about climate change, and the little actions for children to do. And that was comparatively, I feel like it was easy because my training clicks in and I'm just like, okay, this is the facts, this is how we'll structure it. And then I've always been a reader, and fiction is my first love, and so I did want to turn to it. And I must tell you, Pure, and since you're an author yourself and a person of science, I'm sure you understand that it's very hard to suspend your imagination constantly, because in this case, in Bhura, the story is about climate change. How am I supposed to end the story? I mean, because I can't say, oh, and they all lived happily ever after, climate change disappeared, because my journalist self was saying, no, that's not going to happen. Um, so I had to, and that's when again my journalist training came back, where I feel like writing in any form is about observation and listening. And for Bhura, I ended up having to do a lot more of that. I went and met children. I tried to understand what they think of climate change and their actual dialogues in this book. A lot of people say that, oh, they sound like children. I'm like, yes, but they are children. Their dialogues is what I've put into the book at the end of the book. So I do borrow heavily from real life, but I do put in a lot of fantastical elements, because I kind of come from that space where I feel like nature, which I write about, is magic, and I can then play around with all of that.
Wow, now I want to read these books seriously. And I'm really intrigued by your methodology, because you said that you actually go and speak to children even before you write that story, or before you write what they are about to say or how they're about to say it. So, what happens like when you speak to children before you write the story and after they've read the story? So, I want you to tell me about all your Bachu children interactions before and after. I'm just aching to hear them.
Um, so I before, for Bhura especially, I sent out questions into to friends and to different schools. I also went to this wonderful school in Bangalore. It's called Parikrama, and I sat with the children there. We had lots of conversations, because I was asked, like, for instance, Bangalore, a lot of areas face power cuts, and they were just talking. I was saying that with climate change, we're going to see a lot more weather changes, and how are you going to tackle it, especially, like, so they're like explaining to me how, when there's a power cut, the boys were like, we just all go and huddle in one corner and we're playing games in our phone or listening to music. And there's a little bit of that's gone into the book. And at the end, there's a point where these children you've never met before, but they come for a specific purpose. I don't want to give away much, but that's when they're talking about climate change. And it kind of also smashed a lot of my notions, what we as adults think about climate change. A lot of children wanted to do little things. In my interviews, they said, oh, this is what I think we can do. Some of them felt like, I'm too small, what am I going to do? So when I now go into classrooms, and it's kind of amazing, because I have this bit where I read out the cloud is coming into Mumbai, and how everyone starts reacting to it. And then I put the book down. I always ask children, so what would you do? And there's always adults in the class, so I ask them also. And almost always the children are like, I want to do something. And the adults are like, I'm not sure what we can do. And I always find these contrasting responses so amazing, because you're seeing that right now. You're seeing children across the world and young people who are taking up cudgels for the climate and saying, we want to change things. And the adults are like, we're still negotiating. So
I think it's all a part of that inherent spiritualism in the child, which takes responsibility, and the adults have learned to shun it, or to to make others look responsible, or to blame it all on the others and never have anything to do with it. So I mean, it's amazing, because my son, he's 8, and he was a part of the Chipko movement when they were cutting trees for the for the road widening, so he was very upset. He used to cry when the trees were cut down. And I can just totally relate to what you just said, and how the children really want to come up and say, okay, now what do we do? Forget what can others do, now what do we do? And that's, I think, the biggest difference. And I think we need to learn from the children. How have they responded to this book? Like, have they written to you? Do they speak to you? Or have their parents, given you some feedback about what happened after or while they were reading this?
I do get I don't, my email's not public, but I do get mail from children. I've had one child who wanted to one reader who wanted to who planned to start a whole trash segregation drive in her area. Another one wrote a piece of fan fiction around a cloud called Bhura, which I thought was the cutest thing ever. And I
That's
think she won.
ultimate.
And a lot of schools have reacted in some wonderful ways. Like I recently did a session with a Mumbai school, and the children did little artwork from the book, and they'd actually read the book because there's a point where there's this Bollywood actor who's come to do some drama before the politicians do something, and they've drawn that whole scene. So there's a lot of that, but I think my most powerful moment here was when I went to Delhi for Bookaroo in 2019, and that was the year the AQI had first hit 900, and I was in a classroom with children who had come to listen because they were very worried. One of them said that we had left the city, my parents took me, and I just came back and I was missing my friends. Another said that he has asthma and it was perhaps some of the worst weeks of his life. And they were all there to try and say, how do we find a solution to this? What can we do? And it made me extremely sad that this is the environment around children at this point of time, and they have so many questions and it's changing the way they live. So that for me was a very powerful moment at that point to realize that we're living through the realities of this now.
That's so true, and I literally got goosebumps because the children need to be taken seriously, and they are serious about it, and no one even bothers, I guess. And there's someone who needs to give voice to them, and it's amazing the work you do. And let's speak about. You said there's darkness in the world, and it's not necessary that it has to be kept out of children's books. So there'll be many people who think otherwise. So, like, how do you get the darkness in without making it depressing or without making it heavy? Let's say.
You know, Pure, I do creative writing sessions around Bhura in classrooms often, because we have this really fun thing where they create apocalyptic stories around their city. Basically, I try to get them to revisit the city using their five senses, and after which I tell them, if there's a disaster, how would you reimagine your city using these five senses? And I must tell you, almost everyone by the end of it has written everybody's dead in the story. So, children have, we've grown up with fairy tales, which are really, really dark. I mean, you're shoving children into ovens to be roasted into, somebody's parents have, some mother's gone, it's hard for us to even articulate it as adults if we start in deconstructing. So in that sense, darkness and lightness have always been part of our childhood stories. But if you see, there's one thread that always unites them all, and it's something I strongly believe in. I believe that stories, when offered to children and young people, need to offer a sense of hope. So, yes, things like climate change is one of the world's our time's biggest problem. But I also like Bhura ends with a very, very strong message of hope. It doesn't solve the problem, which is not what I wanted. I didn't want neat solutions, and I don't think children want that also. But I want,
and that would be unrealistic.
Exactly. Please continue, Pure. You were saying something.
No, I was just saying that would be unrealistic. So please go on. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I didn't want to, like I said, children then will say, Arey, how like this? They will call you out on that. But I did end on a message of hope. Even my next novel, which is coming out with Harshette in December, it deals with the subject of grief It's about a girl who's just lost her father and she's grappling with the changes. I still wanted to end with hope because I kind of feel that it's the one thing that floats and we have to offer that. And once you do that, I kind of feel, like I said, doesn't have to be tidy ending, but hope is essential for me.
I totally resonate with you on that. And in fact, my third book is based on that. And
What is it on?
no, it's called A Genre Called Hope, and it's actually a romance and kind of it's a different. It's a poetic romance, but
Different from what you've written.
Yeah, very different from the others. Yeah, the first because they've been mysteries and murder mysteries and all that. But yeah, and so and I really loved it that you said that using the senses, because children have now started living in such a virtual world, and to get them back to the actual books and I just hope, like, even if it comes on an ebook format, I just hope they learn to understand what's in it and what they have to do in the real world rather than in the virtual realm. They are in the virtual realm all the time. So and as you said, hope is something so important, and yet it's the words, how you string the words together. So give us some tips or insights into your writing process. Do you have a discipline? How does the day in the life of Bijal look like? How is it?
I am perhaps, I'm a serial procrastinator. So writing doesn't come easy to me. I have a lot of ideas, and which is why I love being editor because I can just keep giving ideas to other writers and watch them do the magic. I'm no stitch. So I'm a very so until I have a really burning idea that I want to write, or I've been commissioned to write something specific, I do find it hard to sit down and have it like from the childhood me who used to write every day. I no longer do that, mostly because I do have a day job. I work with words in a different manner. I work with words as an editor, which often takes a lot out of you because as a picture book editor, you're constantly cutting words and you're constantly working with other people's words and images and all, which does then mean that if I'm also writing something, I then need to step back from my day job and say, okay, this is done for the day. And it's got harder with the virtual world becoming your office. So when I'm writing a book, I don't usually do outlines. What I do is I draw the world that I'm thinking of. So I draw my characters. They're very caricaturish, but I always draw them out, and I kind of try to imagine the space they are in. Once I know, that is when I start writing. It takes me that is and when I know I'm going to write, I do everything to avoid it. I will go dust the shelves, as you can see, it's a mess because I'm editing my book right now. So that's why I've had no reason to clean up my bookshelf because there's no need to procrastinate. I'll go bake chocolate chip cookies. I'll call all my friends who've never heard from me in 1 year. And then I'll be like, then I've run out of excuses. I'll sit and write. And then it often, and one of the things that I would recommend for everybody who's interested in writing, get yourself a friend who will give you objective feedback, completely unbiased, who will call you out when they think something's not working, who'll be happy to read several drafts of your book or your story, because I have friends like that too. And I would strongly say that having somebody to support your writing in that form, um, ideally it's your editor, but so also the other thing as a writer, I would say trust your editor. It's very important. They've worked in this for very long. They know what they are saying. Listen to them.
Wow. So, does the editor in you help the writer, or does it interfere with the writer's job? Because that's
Great question. It totally interferes because a picture book typically has, on an average, 449 words. So now imagine that's what you're doing every day, saying, okay, let's cut this, let's try and see. And every word matters on a page because you'll have one page with maybe 3 words sometimes. So and it's again somebody else's world that you're inhabiting. So it is very, very hard. It actually interferes because I'll also be looking at something and say, do I need that many words in this chapter? And then I'm like, no, but it's a middle grade book. It's not a picture book. You've got to give it those many words. Also, sometimes I'll just be like, but I want a visual element. So, and not all middle grade young adult books have those. I was really lucky that we got to work with Maithili Doshi, who's the art director on this book, where she actually gave us the space to gave the space to Aindri and me to do this, which doesn't happen often.
So I can totally, imagine how visual your book must be, because not only are you already creating caricatures or pictures of your, of your protagonists and all that, plus you are also already working with picture books, and then you want that visual element. Plus, you're telling the students in real life when you speak to them to work with their senses. I can totally understand what a realistic experience it's going to be to them, and I'm sure it is. Like, I don't know what to say. I'm just going to get the book and make my son read it. I know that. Um, as an editor, what tips or suggestions would you give a writer who is foraying into children's work or children's writing?
Um, First, read. Read as much as you can in the format you want to write. So if you want to write picture books, uh, so for instance, if you want to write picture books, then read that many picture books, because uh, I think inherently you have to also be very respectful of the format you're working with. For instance, if you're writing crime, you're going to want to know what's out there in the world to be able to make sure yours is different also, but also to understand the format, especially for children. You need to know what works in terms of form. So one is read, and when I say read everything. Read good things, read bad things, so that you know it's bad. Read stuff that bores you, read stuff that interests you. Go with it as a very clinical way of reading. The other thing is that don't hold back your writing. Have faith in it, because a lot of times I, as an editor, would have a very different vision for a book from a different editor. So don't get dejected if you feel like your book's not going anywhere. You've sent it to multiple publishers and nobody's really reacting. You've heard stories of everybody having multiple rejections. So realize that if your book's not meant for that editor, then it's meant for another publishing house who will see what that book is about. So don't get dejected, especially if you have faith in your writing. The other thing is to revise. I feel like often, like as authors, we love our words. We hold them very precious, but there's wisdom to editing for a reason. So go back to it after a few, like depending on the time you have, months, weeks. Bhura took me 6 years to write because I kept going back to it, rethinking, reimagining. And then we took a few, like Sudeshna Shomgosh, who was my editor on this, she took a few months. That she came back, for instance, and told me that I think it works, but there's this one character, Andrew. I really like him. Can you add more of him? Now, this was on my choice. She'd given me the option, and I could have said, no, I don't want to. I'm done with the book. But I said, no, I want to rethink this. This is a great idea. And it turns out that Andrew's a favorite of many children, and he's the cynical, very funny fellow. So that's the one thing, is that work with, like, edit, because that's when you get that feeling of, and it's very hard to edit your own book, but it comes with practice also, where you realize that, oh, I want more of this can go. And sometimes you have to kill your favorite bits, and you've got to somehow have the courage to do it. But I would strongly say do it.
So that's wonderful advice, because being able to edit your own book automatically means that you're giving a better version to whoever is representing it, or to the editor. And
Can I just add one thing? I read this somewhere. I can't remember the source for it. I'm sorry, but I think it was great, and I always remember it's the first draft is for yourself, the second draft is for your editor, and the book is your readers.
Wow, that was so well said. Uh, but I'm still hanging on to your words where you said that it took you 6 years to write it. And I want to know at what time you felt that, okay, it's okay to offer it or to let go of it to the world. Because that's often, the problem with a person like me. And I have spoken to writers who are like, I don't know whether it's good enough. I don't know if it's ready enough for the world, and it's like a baby being birthed, and should I just leave it, should I just let it go into the world? So what's happening?
I would say trust your instincts on that always. If you feel like it needs work, then stay with it. But with Bhura, I knew it needed work, and that was the first time I went to, collaborated with an agent. My agent's Kanishka Gupta, and I sent it to him, and he wrote back with some feedback, and I said I'm not like 100, like we chatted about it, and then he said let me send it to a few people and see where it goes. And then when Speaking Tiger showed interest in it, I actually then said, oh, I'm now going to take it back and rewrite it. And so I actually sat and rewrote a fair chunk of the book. When I first wrote it, it was only from Amni's point of view. And then I thought about Tammy, who is very different from her friends. She's a RT student in a very posh school, but she's very cool. But she's the privileged check of all these children. She constantly reminds them that their world is a bubble. And to me, Tammy holds the book together. So that's what I did. I went back and rewrote Tammy. And then finally, Sudeshna said, enough, you have to give it to me. So I sent it to her. And that was when I said, okay, I'm going to stop. When you get sick of a book is when you should stop, because that's my advice. When you get sick of
Oh, wow.
and the book is your readers.
Wow, that was so well said. Uh, but I'm still hanging on to your words where you said that it took you 6 years to write it. And I want to know at what time you felt that, okay, it's okay to offer it or to let go of it to the world. Because that's often, the problem with a person like me. And I have spoken to writers who are like, I don't know whether it's good enough. I don't know if it's ready enough for the world, and it's like a baby being birthed, and should I just leave it, should I just let it go into the world? So what's happening?
I would say trust your instincts on that always. If you feel like it needs work, then stay with it. But with Bhura, I knew it needed work, and that was the first time I went to, collaborated with an agent. My agent's Kanishka Gupta, and I sent it to him, and he wrote back with some feedback, and I said I'm not like 100, like we chatted about it, and then he said let me send it to a few people and see where it goes. And then when Speaking Tiger showed interest in it, I actually then said, oh, I'm now going to take it back and rewrite it. And so I actually sat and rewrote a fair chunk of the book. When I first wrote it, it was only from Amni's point of view. And then I thought about Tammy, who is very different from her friends. She's a RT student in a very posh school, but she's very cool. She's the privileged check of all these children. She constantly reminds them that their world is a bubble. And to me, Tammy holds the book together. So that's what I did. I went back and rewrote Tammy. And then finally, Sudeshna said, enough, you have to give it to me. So I sent it to her. And that was when I said, okay, I'm going to stop. When you get sick of a book is when you should stop, because that's my advice. When you get sick of
Oh, wow. And this is another very interesting thing, multiple points of view, multiple POVs, as the writers say. So how was that experience? Because sometimes just working with one POV gets difficult. People are not very comfortable with one or the other, and to write in two different points of view, and then to alternate those possibly. I don't really know how you've done it, but then to get it across to a young audience, that's a big challenge. How did you do it? I mean,
So there's in this book there's still third person narratives, but each chapter intersects with Amni, and the next one goes into Tammy, and that was the structure I had done. So, but it's still a third person narrative where you're listening to Amni's thoughts in one place and you're listening to Tammy's. Sabi and the Memory Keeper, which is coming up, is a first-person narrative which I've never written before, and I must tell you, it's quite a struggle because you want to tell what everyone else is thinking, and you can't, and you have to be like, oh no, I'm going to have to be like a regular person and say, oh, this was what this one must be thinking. So that is hard, but you know what's interesting is that again, because children come from a very different space, they're very not jaded, they're open to new formats. So you give them different voices, like Lily and Dash by this book has two protagonists, first person narratives written by two different authors, and it works wonderfully. So I feel like, again, with young people, you can experiment because they are happy to take in more uh, edgy ideas. So my thing is like, go back to that same thing when I was saying, trust your writer instinct, because if you think that these multiple narratives will work, then you'll have an audience for it.
Another thing you mentioned, and when you were, talking about how one should read within their niche or within their, let's say, genre. So, what do you feel about cross genre writing, or about leaving your niche? Because it's all a matter of creativity. So, if you are no longer feeling creative in that niche, then what happens?
Uh, I I actually, like, genre-wise, I think it's easier because you want to then jump from one genre to another, and like like Savi, my editor, wrote to me saying it's also fantasy and magic realism, and I was like, I don't really know how to change that as an author. So, and she was like, no, it's fine. We can keep it cross genre and leave it at that. And I was like, okay, then I'm fine with it because I genuinely didn't know what to do about it. Uh, and again, like I said, have faith in your editor because they will tell you where you're going. So I think, again, as a writer, you have to be a reader across genres for sure. I was just saying, when you're writing towards a format, then you've got to understand it. But I think it's good to do that because otherwise you'll also not appreciate the kind of diversity that's being created. And then your imagination also gets limited. So, and I think we're at a time where we're seeing more experimental books. We're seeing cross-genre books, like thriller and romance. I mean, I love reading those kind of books. So, I think it's a great time to actually be able to experiment because I feel publishers are more open to these kind of stories.
That's really encouraging. Okay, so now I'm going to try something fun, and I'm going to give you a rapid fire, and you have to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind, okay? Because we're nearing the end of our session, so let's do something that kids would love. Let's imagine that we are the kids in your book. Okay, so rapid fire starts. What's the first thing that comes to you when I say speaking tiger?
Talking Cub.
Talking cub.
Um, Sudeshna Shongu.
Wow. Journalism.
Difficult.
Children.
Awesome.
Bijal.
Ayo.
Ayo.
And you have to take that.
That's got to go in the in yeah.
You have to take that
So
as
if
an answer. It's not.
no, so OCLF, if they were to have an advertisement video and you're going to surely put Ayo in it, I'm sure about that now. Okay, okay, we get back to mode rapid fire. Okay, story
Telling.
telling. Editor,
Scissor hands.
discipline,
One of the most important things.
cloud.
Bhura.
Okay, so now should we make it fun, because more fun, because while speaking to you, I'm just getting more and more inspired. So now let's have a rapid fire with a rhyming word.
Oh.
So I don't know how I would have not done it, but I'm going to
But
make you do it.
if you don't have to make it rapid, I'll be better on it. I'm not very good. Let's try.
Okay, okay, let's make it just fire. Just your editor's fire, okay? Okay, cub.
There was once a talking cub. He saw a tree on which he did a little rap. I don't know if you know this, but tigers do that.
Oh, so like, cats, they're like cats, so they have that
Yeah.
instinct. Yeah, okay. Uh, okay, so story.
Story.
It's okay.
Story.
Gory.
There was. There you go. You
It's okay. You don't have to. I just thought like, okay.
I'll tell you a story. It's going to be bloody and
Oh. Author.
Oh, why do
Okay,
you?
that's difficult.
Author?
That's
It's
very.
going to be such
No,
a.
no. Okay, award. You're an award-winning writer. So
But
that's
why
good.
do you want to be an author? It's such a bother.
Oh my! Seriously. Oh, okay. Award.
Award. There. Awards. Award show. I mean, I feel very. There was one girl. My voice is yeah, this is much better. There was once a girl, she wanted an award, and then she realized hard work, that was the only reward.
Wow, great. So, Janvi, is it time for us to wrap up? I mean, we've been having so much fun. I've lost track of the time. So, Bijal, just before we leave, is there any last message you'd like to tell our audience, and be it about climate change or about anything about their writing or anything like that? Please take it from here.
I want to say that we live in very difficult times where climate change is one of the biggest problems that faces humanity, that faces the species and this planet. And the fact is that the future is in our hands, and we're the ones who can actually make the decision about what we want the story to be when we turn the page. So start small, start at home, think about the kind of green champion you want to be, but also think about the long-term impacts of actions that the world around us, that behavior of other people have. So consider supporting companies and politics that actually believe in in a green future for us. And I have a lot of faith in children, so I see them taking on this mantle, but don't do too much because you also have homework to do. It's the adults' responsibility. So yes, sure, for the great question. Thank you, Orangecity Lit Fest.
Thank you so much, Bijal. It was an honor and a pleasure to speak to you. Over to you, Janvi. Thank you.
At the outset, I would like to thank Ms. Bijal Vachharajani ma'am and Ms. Paya Hart ma'am for joining us today. We wish we get to hear you both again and be equally enlightened as we all are today. And for my dear massive audience, I'm sure that after witnessing this conversation, you all are taking home an enriched version of yourself, just as I will. Thank you for joining us today. Until I see you again. This is Janvi Umre signing off.
Welcome to Raisoni Group, a vision beyond.